I'm really glad to be here, and I'm particularly happy that I was invited to have this conversation. Dominique Sigaud, did I say that right? Yes, is an award-winning journalist, and the reason why I was so happy was, A, the awards have all been, and the recognition has been for the work that Ms. Sigaud has done in Rwanda. But you're currently working on a book. She's currently working on a book on the curse of being a girl. And it's perhaps never been done before, that someone has looked at violence against girl children below the age of 18 globally, and compared countries, compared the nature of violence, compared the social structure that leads to the violence, and what various countries are doing about it. So we sort of, apologies to the News Laundry team, but we changed the topic. When we were chatting 10 minutes ago, we decided that we want to focus on the book instead, the book that's coming out, because given where we are in India as well, I believe that we look at violence against girls and women in pockets of cases that maybe make it to primetime news. We don't look at it holistically as to what's happening, why it's happening. There isn't enough research that's being done. There aren't enough numbers that we can compare to the rest of the world. And for some reason, while the violence also stems, unfortunately, from this horrible idea of the honor of a family somehow being trapped in this area of a girl child, we also stick the entire honor of our country onto this idea. So we don't want to talk about it because we feel that it makes our country look bad in comparison to the rest of the world. And it's that hypocrisy, really, that keeps us from solving the problem. And Ms. Sigaud's book is actually very, very enlightening in that manner, in the fact that you compare what's happening in India and other countries to the rest of the world. I first want to understand what made you write the book. Why did you believe that it was important to look at violence against children, against girls?
So when women begin to say Me Too, many people told they are what we call in France affabulatrices. It comes from fabula. It means that they are telling tales. It's not lying. It's quite different. It's like telling tales. And my father used the same word against me. You're an affabulatrice. Because one day when I was an adult, he told me about his charnel desire about me as a child. I knew I had some problems, but I didn't know which problem I had. So later on, I came to see him. I was 50, and I asked him, okay, you told me you had a desire, a charnel desire for me, so I want to know now what happened concretely. And he never looked at me, and he told me, you are a liar, you are an affabulatrice, and you are crazy, blah, 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 blah. Like they say with every woman. So in my brain, Weinstein and my father went together. And I thought it's very interesting that they always use the same word. So now in France, or when I go everywhere, I say it's very strange because affabulatrice, like she is telling fabula, we don't use it in masculine way. Does it exist that men are liars? Does it exist that men are making fabula? Yes, it exists. I will give you one example. It is on the book. Many girls are killed, many girls are killed, and more and more girls are killed because the family decide that, well, she was wearing a dress, well, she was speaking to a guy, well, she was smiling to someone. And they decide to kill her because they decide that the honor of the family is break down. Which honor? Okay. And there is one country, the Jordani, they decided to autopsy the bodies of the girls, and they discovered that in 80% of the case, the girls are virgin. That means that the men are affabulateurs. The men are lying. and this family are lying. So I began to work about violence against women, but under violence against women, I discovered the violence against girls, and I was like that, really. So I decided that it will be my job, because it exists no book about it. It is the first global book, and we are in the 21st century, the first global book about violence against girls around the world. This is feticide, infanticide, mutilation, sexual mutilation, child marriage, rape. It means rape at home, rape at school, a lot of rape at school in many countries, political rape, war rape, and then trafficking, sexual slavery, domestic slavery, and the end is the killed for honor. And there is a last chapter about crisis, girls into crisis, like climate crisis and war crisis, because NGO discovered that the girls are the first victim in a crisis.
I actually wanted to ask you about that. And you've examined the matter of how the most vulnerable in society, which is girls, in any crisis, whether that's war or, like we talked about, the British Raj, or what we have decided to now call the British occupation of India, that there was violence against girls specifically and in an organized fashion that nobody talked about. So in a lot of cases, this sort of violence has just been erased from history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why do you think that is?
I discovered that in Europe we have had the violence against Jew. But the violence against Jew, and there are some similar between violence against Jew and violence against girls. But violence against Jew became an historical study issue, not the violence against girls. It never became a study historical issue. This is a symptom. It's absolutely abnormal. Because you have millions of girls who are killed every year. So the first one is the feticide. So you decide that you will not have this human being because it is a girl. And I thought about India, because when I came 6 years before, it was after that gang rape against a student. And when I did my job last year, I thought, I understand now why you have gang rapes. Because boys in families hear that a girl is nothing. The father and the mother don't want any girl. So if they don't want any girl, it is because a girl is nothing. We don't want it on the earth. So it is very difficult. So the boys hear it. Even Indian people have an inconscient. Okay? We do agree? We do agree. Okay. So it is inside the family. It is the taboo. But everybody knows it. So boy grow up with the idea that a girl is really nothing. So if it is nothing, I can take it and rape it. It's not a problem. Because everybody showed me that it is nothing. This is the first thing. But for me, the more difficult, I'm sorry if this is sometimes a little bit difficult to speak about it. There are thousands of mothers in the world, in different continents, who are obliged to kill their daughter at the birth with their own hand. They explain me in Egypt, in Morocco, how they do. There are several ways of doing it. Because maybe they are too poor to go to the amniocentesis, so they have to wait. So they carry the baby. I carry the baby, so I know what it is to carry a baby. and it is growing, and it is moving, and it is in, you have a human being in your body. So they have to wait till the birth to know if it is a boy or a girl, and to know if they will have to kill it or not. May you imagine what it is. Thousands of thousands in India, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in Arabic countries, in Latin American countries. And the community come to the mother and said, you have to kill the daughter. No, I don't want, I already killed one. You have to kill the daughter. Okay? And there is no study about it. Nothing. How is it possible? So I say in the book, girls are not small cats. We kill small cats everywhere in the world. We decide to kill small cats. And people decide to kill small girls. Girls belong to humanity. They belong to the human law. This is the first thing we have, all of us, to say again and again and again. It is impossible to go on like that. It is absolutely impossible because, just 1 minute, because if you do so, how all the human inconscient is full of it, full of that murder. It is very, very, very bad for our societies, for boys, for men, for girls, for women. It is very, very, very bad. We have to stop it.
Right. And I just wanted to react to what you were saying. There was a story that came up in India less than a week ago in Uttarkashi in Uttarakhand, in 132 villages, over a period of 3 months.
I know.
There were 230 babies that were born. They were all boys.
Yeah.
Not a single baby girl was born in these 130 villages, which means that the baby girls were being murdered. There is no other explanation for what is happening. But the government turned around and said, we will investigate to see if something is wrong, to a point where the data tells you something is wrong. This cannot happen unless the police and the doctors and the parents are all in collusion and murdering babies. You cannot have this data. But there is a reluctance on everyone's part to acknowledge this as murder and to somehow just pretend like it's baby cats. And, maybe something is wrong, maybe something is not. Let's figure it out. It's almost like they're doing a climate change survey, and it's not something that we need to worry about immediately. But you've also discovered that this is symptomatic across various countries. No one wants to do the studies. No one wants to collate the numbers. It's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because people, let's say that it belongs to the family. It is the problem of the family. So suddenly, the family doesn't belong anymore to the community, to the human community. It's very dangerous because it is the same about incest. There is a lot of incest in the world. In France, in America, in Great Britain, in India, in Morocco, in Egypt, everywhere. Against girls. A lot. No study. In France, zero study. Zero. Because our society don't want to know. But we have to know. Because if we know, we will be able to know in what world we are. What are we doing? It's very important to me. I am speaking a lot with young women like 20. My son is 21, so I know many young women of 20. And they tell me, oh, you're hurting my stomach. Yes. When I hear you and when I read your book, my stomach is hurting. I say, yes, it's normal. It is hurting, but now your generation has to know because you are future. Yeah, yes, you are future, but you are able to face it. You are absolutely able to, and this is the good news. The good news is that if you stop rape, marry, incest, mutilate, blah, 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 the girls, so the girls, like everyone, will have their own desire for their own future and also for their community future. Girls are very aware of community. They are very collective people. because they know they belong to a collective area. So in the part of the world where NGO are now, it's very recent, but now working with girls, it means that the girl is coming in a team, in the staff, and they are discussing, what is your life, your real life? Tell me what is your real life. So tell me, what do you think we should do to help you? By example, there are now, and it should be the same here, shelters. It's very simple to build shelters. And there are clandestine shelters in the field where girls can escape if someone wants to marry them or want to mutilate them. And of course, there are adults in the shelters who receive the girls, and the adult come to see the family and say, we have a problem. Your girl really doesn't want to be mutilated or married, so we will discuss with you as long as we accept that your girl will stay entire, not cut in any way. Girls have to stay entire, because life is something difficult, even if you are not raped, if you are not incested, if you are not so on, mutilated. Life is something quite difficult. So you have to have your own energy, which is staying. And if you marry a girl, I went to Morocco to meet women who have been married, children, like 13, 14. So they were raped every night. They were shouting, they were crying, and it was going on. And I met men, and they were telling the same. They were saying it was wild, it was awful, but everybody say you have to do it like that. It is like dozens of countries in the world like that. And when I came back, I called the UNICEF in Morocco, and I said, are you crazy? Are you crazy? Do you know what is happening in your own country? Do you know what is happening in your houses? Why is it like that? Tell me why. Give me one reason of that. No reason. Absolutely not. And in France, we have every year, there is in 11th of October, the International Day for the Girls. We will speak about it because I will ask you to organize marches on this day for 2020. Because we have to see girls now, outside. Just girls. What is girl? Well, this is girls. And it was in Parliament for this day. And there was the chief of the UNICEF. And the chief of the UNICEF was a man. Went to speak about girls' marriage, child marriage. And they say, oh, it's wrong, child marriage, because they become pregnant when they are 15, and it's bad for the body, and it's bad for the future, because they don't want, they can't anymore go to school, blah, 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 blah. And we were waiting. And we were asking, will he speak about it? Will he speak about it? Will he speak? No, no word. Absolutely no word. Because it is inconvenient to speak about rape. No, it is not inconvenient. It is inconvenient to do it. And it is absolutely inconvenient to accept it. There are millions of girls each night who are raped. Each night. You know? And they are crying and they are shouting. And the man is doing the same the day after. So now, please, listen to me. If boys, millions of boys, were sodomized each night by men who are 10 years older, I'm sure I will hear something. I'm sure, absolutely sure. But girls, they are girls. So you are very silent.
Well, I do want to ask you this, because this is a collection of journalists, journalism students, and people who are invested one way or the other in the media. You did say, of course, and you were telling me about how when you started doing your research, there were people who came up to you saying, we can't talk about it, but you can. Yeah. So there is a responsibility here for the media, and the media can be the starting point to fix this silence when it comes to violence against girls?
It has always been my job to throw out silence and to speak, because we need to know. It's absolutely, because domination goes into the silence, used to silence, blah, 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 shut up. And all the violence against girls are including the obligation of mute. You are insisted by your father, shut up. You are raped, shut up. You are married, shut up. I met women who have been mutilated. It is awful what they explain. And they explain that the day they are mutilated, people say, now you shut up. And a woman in France who is specialized about rape told me that when you have crossing that kind of traumatism, the act, and somebody is telling you something, the words are coming into the act. You can't separate anymore. So I met women in France who try to be reparated sexually, and they say, we never speak about it, never. So my point, one of my major points in the book, is to say that every human being now, normally, is allowed to have his own narratives. It's to say, I am this one, I want to be this one, I was this one, I would like to be this one, blah, 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 blah. I'm like this, I'm like that, blah, blah, blah. It is very important for children to grow with their own narratives. And we know that the girls say, well, I am a princess, I will be a doctor, blah, 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 blah. But in this case of violence, the community, the family, sometimes the country, comes to the girl and say their own narrative. It means, you're a girl, so, blah, 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 and I explain you your own narratives. It is destroying the narratives of the girls. This is the first point. And the second point is that, the desire of a girl, listen to me, the desire of a girl everywhere in the world is not to be incested, not to be raped, not to be mutilated, not to be married at 15, not to be sexually abused, not to be trafficking, blah, 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 blah. But people inside this violence put their own desire on the desire of the girl. The desire of the girl is not existing anymore. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And this is why it is organized like that. And then this desire of a man, a father, a community, a family is crushing?
Yes.
Yes, crushing the girl desire.
I want to open this up to questions right now, if you have any. And I also think that on some point, I'd also want to talk about the idea of consent. And if we pull, we draw from your idea of desire, at the end of the day, do we as a race or as a society place enough stock in, as human beings, place enough stock in the idea that little girls have consent and that their permission is needed or required, their comfort is important, their discomfort is important. And, I realized this when we were talking about Me Too in my office. When little girls at home are constantly told to sort of put up with it, right? If you're uncomfortable, I don't like it here, shh, now only 5 minutes more. So you're always told to, in order to be a nice, liked little girl, that you have to put up with discomfort, that you have to wear an uncomfortable outfit, you have to smile, that uncle will kiss you with his pokey beard and don't say anything about it. Put up with the discomfort. Do we hear the discomfort of little girls enough? And if we acknowledge that discomfort, do we raise young women and grown women who will say, I'm not comfortable? when young people are together and someone is being berated for not drinking, for example, and everybody else says, oh, you know, she's such a behenji and she's not cool and she's not getting a drink, do the rest of us stand up for that person's discomfort and say, hey, leave her alone, she's not comfortable? But somehow, collectively as society, we allow little girls and young women and grown women to be uncomfortable, and we tell them to put up with it constantly. And I believe that on some level that leads to sexual harassment in the workplace, it leads to incest, it leads to sexual assault, because you're constantly told that if you want to be liked, if you want to be sushil, if you want to be a nice girl, you won't complain, you won't cry, you won't make a noise about the fact that you're not comfortable. It's always about somebody else's comfort. Mothers are told in India that you have to put your likes and dislikes and physical comfort last, after everybody else's. Wives are told to put their discomfort last, because his comfort is more important. The children are more important. Society is more important. The family's name is more important. What will people say is more important. We come last. And does that then create a fertile ground for all of this violence? Because then we pass it on from generation to generation. There was someone in the back who put their hand up. A young man? Yes, go ahead. We'll just get you a mic.
Hello.
Yes.
So you talked about the sexual violence at home, at workplace. So what about the sexual violence by the state forces, the armed forces? For example, in Kashmir, the armed forces are protected by a special law called the AFSPA, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. According to this act, no armed forces personnel can be prosecuted in a civilian court without the prior sanction of the central government. So after the Nirbhaya rape case, Justice Verma committee report suggested that AFSPA, this clause should be removed, and that armed forces personnel who are accused of sexual violence should be prosecuted in a civilian court. In the AFSPA is at present, it is functional in Kashmir and in Northeast. So don't you think that state also protects the sexual violation, the people who do sexual violations?
You don't speak about UN, you speak about army.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, of course, in every country. In every country, in France it's the same. We have problems with police, we have problems, not with army, but I understand that you have problem with army, of sexual violence. And in crisis, we have problems with the UN people who rape girls too. And of course, the only point is everybody has to be somehow courageous. It is not easy to fight against sexual violence. It is not easy at all. So first you have to say it, and then you have to go together to exiger, ask. You have to go together to ask that something will happen. I mean, civilian have a power to. It is possible to do things as civilians. You see? I know, yesterday we spoke about Kashmir too. So I know there is a big problem, and it is true that during political crisis, the rape is used as a weapon. And now there is a special UN rapporteur about rape in conflicts. In Sudan, 1 girl on 2 is raped. 1 on 2. So in my book, I ask now that in the UN compound, they create special area for girls, and this special area are protected by women soldiers, because men soldiers of UN rape girls.
Sorry, I have a bias. I'm going to introduce as many female voices into the questions.
I wanted to ask you about, the anecdote that you narrated, where there are these silent sort of these covert spaces, where shelters where children are sent clandestine places, and then there are negotiations that happen with the parents. I was just concerned about this process of repatriating them to people who wanted them dead, and how that process would be to have that child forced to take that child back, and how that child, whether it's healthy for that child to grow up with those parents. And these processes of rehabilitation of victims of rape, particularly children, and what you see is working and not working, and if that's in your book.
Many girls are sold to Saudi Arabian people, men, even in India. It is not exactly the point. Of course, if the family doesn't accept that the girl is not on their own desire, the girl will stay in the shelter. And she would go in an NGO, UN, and so on. But the problem is that many parents think that if the girl is not mutilated, she will not be married. So the shelter adults have to negotiate with parents and to explain them that it is not the truth, that it is changing. The parents think that they have to do it. And in many cases, the girls go to the parents and say, I don't want to be mutilated. Can you imagine that? And she is mutilated. So it's very interesting. In Egypt, I met women who are doing the same in rural area. They come to the family and speak and speak and speak and speak and speak. That's why I was telling. And to school, very, very important. They make small association for a quarter, a village, and they speak and speak and speak and speak. And it is changing. There is
a very persistent hand in the back.
Yeah, France, of course, is a much more liberated and egalitarian society than India. But yet the backlash against the Me Too movement, Balance Stop Pork, was very strong in France.
Yes, of course.
Good afternoon. As ma'am rightly said, girls have been oppressed at a household level. So do you think there's a change in the current, in the patriarchal structure of the current social milieu to subvert hypermasculinity and further the agenda of female autonomy and equality?
A change where? In Delhi, in India?
Like overall in the mindset of the people, any social cultural changes that have been made, do you think there's a change?
Do you see changing? Do you see change in society and families?
Yeah, because I went here 6 years ago. And I tried to speak about the rapes. And it was very difficult. And today it's not. So yes, really something has changed. And I'm very happy to feel it, because there is open mind. And now, there is a small, very important moment that we are able together to change something. Yes, I really feel the change. Because I remember I said to boys, it was in the university, I said them, maybe you could put a pin or something to say, girls, if you are in trouble, I can help. But somebody yesterday told me, yes, but some bad men, we used it and to try to atterate girls. So I know it is difficult.
Hi, my question is, why does the state protect godmen across the board who are accused of molestation?
This is domination.
Yeah.
This is domination. And I was speaking about Saudian men, Gulfi men, but most of them are Saudian men, who are doing very bad things all around the world. Everywhere where there is poor girls, they go and buy for a ring in false gold, false gold. And they rape them and blah, 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 blah. But they are using their position, political position, to say, we give money to your society, we give money to fight against Islamist terrorism, which is wrong, because they give money to Islamist terrorism. And the problem is now, in these days, the mutilation is going further in Arabic countries. It is very bad. And in your societies, you have to be very careful. There is small community in India which practice the mutilation. It is very specific. But around, in Arabic countries, Islamic countries, more and more they are using that because girls are trying to speak out. Because there has been the fail of Arabic revolution. And many women went out and girls went out. And I have heard horrible things what happened in jails, in police, because they punished there, so they try to speak. So everybody has to be very courageous.
Hello. My question is that in a country like India, you cannot just see rape and these crimes as isolated crimes against women. We know what happened to that girl in Unnao, and we know that her identity also plays a role. We saw what happened to that girl in Kashmir, where people took out marches and said that the logic was given that Hindus cannot rape. And such kind of protection exists because of religion. And even when IS came to power, the Islamic State, fatwa was passed that jihad al-nikah, so you can rape women at your will because you are the victors. So in that case, how can we fight for women and keeping their identities in mind?
It takes a long time. It takes really a long time. Time out. You have to want it. You have to want it, and you have to build tools. It's not like that. It takes years and years to speak to people and to say we disagree, and to write books and to go to school and to go outside it takes years and years. But you have to do it, because if you don't do it, the rapers are lonely on the street. You have to be on the street too. This is the world. Always. There is always the one who is destroying and the one who is trying to do something good. It's the only story in any country. In mine is the same.
Yes. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. And I want to push this idea and just plant it in everyone's head, the idea of consent and comfort and physical comfort of women and girls. And I think that also pushes to the idea of the fact that even during sex, that women and girls have to be comfortable and they have to enjoy it, and it has to be pleasurable. It's an idea that we do not push. It's all about the male pleasure, and it's never about the female pleasure. Men punch each other and say, hey dude, you're such a dude, you actually got laid, but nobody ever says, you're such a dude, she came, she enjoyed it. That's what makes you cool. I think all pornographic content, all film content, Bollywood, everything's pushing to the idea that a woman is meant to be conquered in some way, that her consent is meant to be broken down with persistent harassment. But it's never about her physical comfort, her desire, her pleasure. And I think that as a society, if we use these words more often, and we tell young people and older people that it's only if you like it, it's only if you want it, it's only if you're comfortable, that it's good, to both boys and girls. I think the idea of consent will slowly make these things less and less like taboo and weird, and the fact that we don't want to talk about it. So I think that this is something we can do even in our smaller circles, and then take forward everything you said about going out and talking about it. And as members of the media, we have a larger than extended footprint and voice that we can extend.
So the good news, you're right, absolutely. The good news is that when women like to make love, it's better for the women and it's better for the men. So